In our daily lives, we often mistakenly believe that those around us, family, friends, colleagues, and acquaintances, genuinely care about us. However, upon deeper reflection, it becomes apparent that such concern is often conditional, dependent on personal interests, fleeting emotions, or even societal pressures. Buddhism, with its wisdom and compassion, teaches that seeking validation from others is a source of suffering. When you expect others to fully understand and empathize with you, you place yourself in a vulnerable position. This not only leads to suffering but also undermines your inner freedom. This story begins with a simple yet profound truth: no one truly cares about you as much as you think. This is not advice to abandon trust in others, but a reminder that genuine care must come from within. It is an awakening, helping you to see the true nature of relationships and the reality of life. In the Buddhist scriptures, there is a famous story about a man who suffered greatly from the losses in his life. The Buddha taught that suffering stems from attachment and excessive desire. When you understand that each person has their own journey and that no one can always be there to shoulder your worries, you will recognize the value of independence and freedom. True freedom begins when you stop seeking external recognition. People may praise you today but forget you tomorrow. External validation is impermanent and cannot be sustained. Only by turning inward can you find stability and true happiness. Look within, where genuine self-respect and tranquility reside. In meditation, we learn to return to our breath, our mind, and our presence. This is when you realize that you do not need anyone else to complete you, for you are already complete in your own way. The Buddha once said that all sentient beings possess Buddha nature, meaning the potential to achieve enlightenment and peace. However, to attain this, you must awaken and break free from the illusions of external validation and the pursuit of happiness from outside sources. Live truthfully with yourself, without pretense or the need to please others. When you practice mindfulness, you realize that freedom comes from accepting yourself as you are. You are no longer bound by judgments or expectations from others. You live freely, not because others do not care, but because you have understood the value of independence and inner freedom. This awakening does not come from a single moment of reflection but is a long journey of self-awareness and cultivation. Begin with small steps, such as listening to your own emotions, accepting them without judgment, and gradually letting go of unrealistic expectations. It is in this process that you will find true freedom and, from there, a more peaceful and happy life. On the path of cultivation and the search for inner freedom, one of the greatest obstacles every individual faces is the self. The self, or ego, is often understood as the sense of self-importance and centrality. However, Buddhism, through its scriptures and teachings, asserts that the self is merely an illusion, a concept created by the mind, lacking any permanent or fixed entity. According to Buddhism, the self does not exist independently but is formed by the five aggregates: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. These components are interdependent and constantly changing, nothing is immutable. The greatest mistake humans make is clinging to the self, believing in a fixed, unchanging identity. This is the root cause of all suffering. We often seek validation from others to affirm our self-worth. This expectation traps us in a cycle of suffering and disappointment. For example, when others do not appreciate our efforts, we feel hurt and even question our value. However, these feelings stem from attachment to the ego, the belief that our self is important and needs to be upheld. In the Diamond Sutra, the Buddha taught, all compounded phenomena are like a dream, an illusion, a bubble, a shadow, like dew or a flash of lightning. Thus, one should view them. This implies that everything we consider real, including the self, is merely an illusion without true substance. Understanding that the self is an illusion frees us from being bound by expectations or negative emotions from others. Instead of striving to protect and elevate the self, we learn to let go, perceive reality objectively, and remain calm. This is the first step toward achieving inner freedom. Furthermore, recognizing the self as an illusion helps us understand the nature of suffering. All suffering arises from attachment to the self. When hurt, we suffer not because of the event itself but because we feel our self is threatened. Letting go of the self, we are no longer affected by external changes, thus finding true peace. In the process of cultivation, meditation is an effective method to identify and let go of the self. In meditation, we observe our mind, noting thoughts and emotions as they arise and fade. Through this, we clearly see that nothing is fixed, including the self. This helps us break free from attachment to the self, leading to a more liberated and peaceful life. In summary, the self is an illusion, lacking any fixed entity. Clinging to the self only brings suffering and hinders our quest for inner freedom. By understanding and letting go of the self, we achieve true peace and happiness. This is the path that Buddhism guides each individual to self-liberation from the cycle of suffering. In the journey toward liberation and inner peace, one of the most essential lessons that every practitioner must deeply understand is the letting go of expectations from others. The world is full of complex relationships and interactions, where we often become attached and place expectations on others to seek validation and self-worth. However, it is this very expectation that becomes the source of suffering and bondage. Buddhism teaches that all phenomena are impermanent, and nothing is fixed or eternal. When we expect others to always meet our needs and desires, we are going against the impermanent nature of life. Such expectations not only harm relationships but also lead to profound disappointment when those expectations are unmet. A common example can be seen in relationships with family, friends, or colleagues. We often expect that others will always understand and support us. But each person has their own life, thoughts, and circumstances, and no one can fully understand and meet all of our desires. When we place too many expectations on them, disappointment becomes inevitable. In the Buddha's Four Noble Truths, he pointed out that the root cause of suffering is craving and attachment. Expectation from others is a form of craving, as we long for attention, love, or recognition from the outside. This makes us dependent on others, stripping us of our inner freedom and the ability to love ourselves truly. Letting go of expectations does not mean abandoning relationships or becoming indifferent. On the contrary, it is an act of liberation for both ourselves and others from unnecessary attachments. When we no longer expect others to fulfill all of our needs, we allow them to live according to their true nature and abilities. This creates healthy relationships, where acceptance and understanding replace control and imposition. A practitioner following the Buddhist path must understand that happiness and peace do not depend on external circumstances or the approval of others. Mindfulness and meditation are methods that help us return to ourselves, recognize and release unrealistic expectations. Through this, we learn to love ourselves truly, no longer relying on external validation. True freedom lies in no longer forcing ourselves to please anyone. We live authentically, without pretense, not trying to become someone others expect us to be. The Buddha taught that liberation can only be attained when we let go of all attachments, including those arising from expectations and desires. In life, there are many circumstances where letting go of expectations becomes a valuable lesson. When we realize that everything changes and nothing is certain, we can more easily accept impermanence and find peace in the present moment. This is the key to unlocking the door to freedom, where the mind is no longer bound by anything. In summary, freeing ourselves from expectations is an important step on the path to practice and liberation. By letting go of unrealistic expectations, we not only free ourselves from suffering, but also create the space for the development of genuine love and inner freedom. This is the path to sustainable happiness and peace, where we live fully in the present, unbound by anything other than our own minds. Compassion, one of the highest virtues in Buddhism, carries a profound and comprehensive meaning that transcends conventional concepts of love. In Buddhism, compassion is not merely love or empathy, but love that arises from understanding, with no expectations, and not bound to results or responses. The Buddha taught that compassion is unconditional love, arising from wisdom and enlightenment about the nature of life. Compassion is not a temporary feeling or pity, but a steadfast state of mind, always ready to help others overcome suffering without expecting anything in return. When you practice compassion in this way, you not only help others but also liberate yourself from the bindings of emotions and expectations. When you love without expecting anything in return, you have crossed an important threshold on the path of practice. Because expectation always carries the risk of disappointment. When you help someone hoping to receive something in return, you place yourself in a vulnerable position. If the expectation is unmet, you may fall into disappointment or even resentment. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha taught, like a person who chops wood seeking fruit, but only finds dry leaves falling, so too, a person who acts with expectation will only receive suffering. Compassion without conditions allows you to transcend this binding, helping you act with serenity, undisturbed by emotions or results. Acts of compassion without expectation not only benefit the recipient but also nourish your soul. Inner peace does not come from success or from the response of others, but from the selfless act itself, from freedom from the bindings of external emotions. When you are not influenced by expectations or negative feelings, you will experience true peace in your heart. In the practice of metta meditation, loving kindness, practitioners learn to extend their loving kindness to all beings, without discrimination, without expectations. You begin by directing loving kindness to yourself, then expand it to loved ones, friends, neutral individuals, and ultimately to all beings, including those with whom you have conflicts. This is a vital practice that helps you cultivate unconditional compassion, freeing yourself from anger and negative emotions. Unconditional compassion also helps you develop understanding and patience. When you act without expecting anything, you learn to accept whatever happens with a calm mind. You are no longer shaken by the fluctuations of life but maintain peace and serenity within. Moreover, unconditional compassion is an essential factor in helping you build and sustain healthy relationships. When you love and care for others without imposing conditions, you create an environment of genuine, lasting affection. Relationships are no longer governed by demands or expectations but are based on understanding and mutual sharing. In summary, unconditional compassion is a profound and necessary lesson on the path of practice and enlightenment. It helps you transcend the bindings of emotions, nourish inner peace, and build enduring relationships. By practicing unconditional compassion, you not only help others overcome suffering but also free yourself from life's attachments, thereby attaining true peace and happiness. Impermanence, or anicca in Pali, is one of the three marks of existence taught by the Buddha, alongside suffering, dukkha, and non-self, anatta. Understanding and accepting impermanence is not only the key to overcoming suffering, but also the gateway to inner freedom and peace. Life is a continuous flow of change. Nothing in this world is permanent. From trivial things like weather and daily emotions, to significant events such as birth and death, everything follows the cycle of arising, enduring, changing, and ceasing. Humans are often trapped in a cycle of seeking permanence, leading to suffering when things we desire are not maintained or are lost. Acceptance of impermanence is not just a theoretical understanding, but a practice and deep realization through personal experience. As we begin to see clearly that everything changes, we learn to let go of attachment. This is a difficult lesson, as human nature often craves stability and certainty. However, the more we cling to things that cannot last, the more we create suffering for ourselves. One of the clearest examples of impermanence is the change in relationships. Love, friendship, and family, no matter how beautiful and meaningful, are not immune to change. Loved ones may depart, or relationships may evolve over time. When we accept that nothing is permanent, we will learn to cherish every moment together, no longer placing too much expectation on the eternity of relationships. Accepting impermanence also helps us face loss and death with greater tranquility. The Buddha taught that birth, aging, sickness, and death are natural laws of life. We cannot avoid losing loved ones or the end of our own existence. Instead of resisting or fearing, we learn to accept and live fully in the present moment. Valuing the present does not mean living recklessly or indifferently. On the contrary, it is a way of living mindfully and attentively. When we realize that every moment is precious and cannot be repeated, we live more fully, not wasting time on meaningless pursuits. This is the freedom the Buddha referred to: freedom from the constraints of the past and worries about the future, to live fully in the present. Impermanence also teaches us humility and gratitude. When we understand that everything changes, we are no longer complacent or arrogant about our successes, knowing they are temporary. At the same time, we become grateful for the good things that have come our way, even if only for a fleeting moment. This gratitude not only nourishes compassion, but also alleviates suffering when facing unwanted changes. Embracing impermanence is not an easy journey. It requires mental discipline and constant practice. Meditation is one of the methods that helps us deeply understand and accept impermanence. Through mindfulness meditation, we can observe the changes in every breath, thought, and sensation. In doing so, we learn to live harmoniously with the flow of life, no longer trying to control or resist it. In conclusion, accepting impermanence is a pivotal step on the spiritual path. It helps free us from the bonds of suffering and opens the door to inner peace and freedom. When we live with change, not clinging to what no longer exists, we will find true peace in each present moment, living more fully and meaningfully each day. Patience and acceptance are crucial qualities that the Buddha always encouraged his disciples to cultivate on the path to awakening. We often desire to find inner peace and freedom quickly, but these values cannot be achieved in an instant. This process requires patience, a persistent attitude in facing every challenge, and acceptance, which means agreeing with reality without trying to change the unchangeable. Patience is not only endurance but also the ability to maintain a calm mind in any situation, whether difficult or favorable. The Buddha taught that patience is an inner strength that helps us face adversity without letting it shake our spirit. Patience does not mean passively accepting all suffering, but calmly confronting difficulty, from which we can find ways to overcome it without being overwhelmed by pressure or worry. In daily life, we often encounter situations that cause stress, frustration, or suffering. At such times, without patience, we are easily swept into anger, anxiety, or even despair. However, when we cultivate patience, we learn to face these negative emotions calmly, without letting them dominate our mind and actions. Acceptance, on the other hand, is agreeing with reality as it is, without attempting to change things that cannot be changed. In the Buddha's teachings, acceptance is the first step in overcoming suffering. We cannot control every aspect of life, but we can control how we respond to what happens. Acceptance does not mean resignation or giving up, but recognizing that some things are beyond our control, and what matters is how we respond to them. This acceptance is particularly important when facing loss, illness, or unwanted change. When we accept reality, we reduce the suffering caused by inner resistance. Acceptance does not make the pain go away, but it prevents us from adding more suffering by struggling against the unchangeable. On the spiritual path, patience and acceptance also help us realize the value of living authentically with ourselves. Being true to oneself is not just about acknowledging our flaws and mistakes, but about living according to the values and principles we believe in. When we live authentically, without pretending or relying on approval from others, we find a deep sense of freedom. This freedom is not freedom from responsibility or duty, but freedom from the constraints of societal expectations and pressures. When we are no longer dependent on recognition or judgment from others, we feel lighter and more at ease in life. We no longer feel compelled to please others, but instead, we live an honest, fulfilling, and meaningful life according to our own way. Patience and acceptance are also essential qualities in building and maintaining relationships. In any relationship, there will be times when we must face conflict or dissatisfaction. Without patience and acceptance, we can easily become caught up in negative emotions and damage the relationship. But when we know how to be patient and accept, we can resolve conflicts peacefully, understand and empathize with others, thus creating stronger, happier, and more lasting relationships. Finally, patience and acceptance are necessary qualities for attaining inner peace and freedom. The Buddha taught that the path to enlightenment is not a short or easy one. It requires perseverance, patience, and acceptance of every challenge and difficulty. But when we learn to cultivate these qualities, we will find true peace and freedom, transcending all suffering and the constraints of life. In closing this story, we are reminded of a profound truth: freedom and peace do not lie in recognition or concern from others, but come from within ourselves. This is the key lesson in Buddhist teachings, a lesson that is not only philosophical but also practical, helping us find liberation from the constraints of suffering and turmoil. Letting go of the idea that others need to care about us is a liberating journey. In life, people often crave attention, love, and recognition from others. We often place our happiness in the hands of others, hoping that they will provide us with a sense of safety and worth. However, by doing this, we unwittingly become slaves to expectations and disappointments, because no one can fully meet our inner needs. Buddhism teaches that true liberation is not found in seeking attention from the outside, but in returning to oneself, caring for oneself, and nurturing the soul. When we learn to care for ourselves, we not only enhance our mental and physical health but also create an inner environment that is stable, unaffected by external changes. Self-care requires understanding our needs, knowing when to rest, when to work, and respecting our limits. Acts of compassion are an integral part of this journey. Compassion is not only caring for others but also being gentle with oneself. When we learn to treat ourselves with compassion, we become less harsh and judgmental of ourselves, instead nurturing self-respect and love. Compassion also helps us view others with an open heart, without expecting repayment or recognition. This is the foundation of peace and harmony in relationships. Accepting impermanence is one of the most important elements in seeking freedom and peace. Impermanence is the nature of all phenomena in life. Nothing is permanent, everything changes and transforms over time. When we accept this, we stop clinging to temporary things and no longer fear loss and change. Accepting impermanence allows us to live fully in each moment, appreciating what we have without worrying about the future or regretting the past. Living fully in the present is the final and most important lesson. Buddhism emphasizes mindful living, which means being fully aware and conscious of each moment of life. When we live fully in the present, we are not disturbed by worries about the future or regrets about the past. We enjoy every experience, no matter how small, with a heart full of gratitude and a joyful spirit. This is the path to true freedom and peace. In conclusion, this story reminds us that happiness and freedom are not distant, but lie within our own hands. By letting go of unrealistic expectations, returning to ourselves, living with compassion, accepting impermanence, and living fully in the present, we can find true peace and freedom. This is not only a lesson in Buddhism but also a lesson for everyone in life, regardless of their religion. True freedom and peace cannot be bought or sought from the outside. They are the result of cultivating the soul and mindfulness in every moment of life.